The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. My biggest existential issue was always the problem of evil. And I know that for many who are into philosophy, it is the fact that there's so much evil in this world that is so hard to fathom. And for the sake of this video, we don't need to define evil in like a very objective morality type way. We understand evil when we see it. Like if somebody needlessly murders your parents, or if somebody takes your newborn baby and starts torturing it. Like we don't have to have a huge philosophical debate about if this is objectively evil or not, but viscerally we sense it. And it's the sense of evil that has a lot of profundity in it, to the extent that it makes us want to deny reality itself. Like I remember wishing that somehow existence couldn't be. It wasn't enough for me to just cease to exist. I wanted everything to cease to exist, because I could not fathom how any benevolent force could have created this world. Now, the proposition I want to make in this video is to imagine what would a world look like if the main force for its creation was unconditional love. Now, unconditional love would require a world that is completely free to be whatever it can be, without any desire to enforce your own will onto this world. Like if a god created this world and gave it absolute freedom, then this would be unconditional love. Now, this seems logical if you take it to the logical extreme, right? Like why would God create a tree but not a giraffe? Why would God create war but not like Call of Duty? You would have to create a world where everything is allowed, and therefore you have this infinite expression that you then find in this world. Now, as logical as this might seem, it feels extremely visceral and disgusting the moment you say something like God loves, and now you say whatever awful thing comes to your mind. And then it feels very evil, because how could you accept so horrible things that we do to each other? Like it's not just humans to humans, right? You might even argue that the way we treat animals is very awful, or the way nature treats itself is very awful. That murder and eating one's own, eating one's own kind of, or just this cyclical way of life and death and pain is in of itself too much to be accepted. And then whatever unconditional love would have to include also that. And there's no limit to this idea then, right? Like you can imagine the worst Cthulhu nightmare terrors, like cosmical terrors with immense proportions, and unconditional love would have to include it. There would be no way to escape it. Now, this might seem like, for some people, a really fucked up way to frame love, because for us humans, love is care. And care usually means care for well-being. And in the way I'm arguing about or presenting the idea of unconditional love is even beyond well-being. Like if you care more about any particular form, more than another, then you're already not loving it unconditionally. Like if you have to intervene as the highest deity on the most meta level, then you're picking favorites, right? You say, no, this is unacceptable. This is a part about my capability, about my infinite potential that I do not want to accept. and therefore I limit it and therefore make it impossible. Now you could also call this like form of love freedom, that the world is free to explore itself without any limitation. Now you might ask, why love? Why not just call it hate? Like, why not say reality is infinite hatred? Now, if you want to, you can, right? If you want to focus on the fact that reality is dividing itself endlessly, and this division is collision and separation into different forms, because all forms reject each other. Meaning that if you like yourself in this like very kind of almost silly proposition, you would then basically hate everybody who is not you, and this is why you want to preserve yourself. But I don't think that this is really the nature of hatred. Like, hatred needs to destroy another. Like, infinite hatred would mean that you need to hate like all of existence, therefore you must destroy all of existence. And if I want to get very philosophically creative, you might say that, yeah, this is also what's happening, because in impermanence, like in this like sea of material reality and conscious experience, everything is destroying itself all the time, and everything is letting go of itself all the time. But clearly the mechanism underneath here is a mechanism of connection. It is actually the mechanism of interconnectivity that communicates information between all things. There's not really something there that separates everything. Like, even within atoms or time and space or time, like the only way any of it works is because all of the physical laws of the universe are intimately interconnected. So love could be described as the quality of interconnectivity or connection. But I think there's even a better way to like figure out or to assess whether love is the right word for whatever is going on here. Imagine that you are again in this empty space of like nothingness, and you are all powerful, like you are God himself, you are infinite potential. And now there's like just nothing there. And if you want something to be there, this desire for something to be there rather than nothing is what love is. If you love something, you want it to exist. You want to be connected to it. And you want to appreciate it for its own existence. Now, if this is the key spark that made all of reality happen, then it is reasonable to think about the Big Bang as like the initial form of infinite love. Now, you might ask, okay, but why does it have to be unconditional? Why can it not be something that is like somewhat conditional? And I mean, again, here, the relative helps, right? It is somewhat conditional because at the end of the day, it manifests into human beings, and we human beings can make the decision about what we think is right and what we think is wrong. And just because on the most meta level, the universe is ultimately free, doesn't mean that we should live in anarchy and just kill each other for no good reason. So, on the other hand, in this like God type space, if you then see, oh, I want something to be, then you already are in this kind of conundrum. Okay, so what do you want to create? Like, do you want to create like a giraffe, but you don't like the tree, and therefore you make it so that only giraffes are possible, but trees aren't? Like, you're limiting so much more the moment you try to limit just a tiny bit. Like, the moment you say that viruses shouldn't be possible, like life on Earth isn't possible. The moment you say war shouldn't exist, then what about all the nice shooter games that we play and we have fun with? Like, they are inspired by real death, and because we can kill each other. The same with drama and the way we can like experience movies in this very lived and visceral way. It only works because hatred is also allowed in this like infinite sea of love. The desire to separate yourself from another or hurt another is a crucial part of how this entire machinery works. Like, in a way, you need to be able to forget who you are in order to rediscover what you are capable of. Now, from this framing, it seems reasonable to say that, well, reality is made out of unconditional love because any sort of restriction would make love itself not possible. Like, if the nature of existence is love, then the world that you are seeing right now, with all its awful and wonderful parts, would be a reasonable consequence. Like, purely logically. You don't need to believe in a god and you don't need to be the god himself. You just need to kind of follow my logic here and see that, yeah, purely logically speaking, unconditional love would create a world that looks exactly like the world that we're living in. Now, the beauty about this is that you can actually connect with this feeling. The ego is the sense of self that separates you from the sense of interconnectivity with other things. And if you had an experience of a sort of, yeah, let's say cosmic connectivity or, yeah, love with another person or deep meditative spaces or psychedelic experiences, then the sense that everything is made out of love feels very intuitive. It feels like kind of obvious, and it feels odd that we normally don't perceive it this way. And it's because suddenly we see that every single atom is binding with each other. All gravity is doing is like pulling things together and uniting things. And the same is true for time and space and all atoms. And all that you see is kind of like an information flow of interconnectivity that, oddly enough, the moment you lose your sense of ego, yeah, like your sense of separation from all other things, then the feeling is suddenly a universal sense of love. As if the version of you that could choose between the tree and the giraffe looked at it and thought that the highest good, the highest level of bliss and pure, yeah, freedom it could create, the highest level of love that is possible in this universe would be to simply allow it all and then to be it all and then to connect with it all so thoroughly, so fully, without the possibility to deny even one single bit of it. Now, this is actually quite practical because the evolution of your own consciousness in terms of acceptance for who you are, acceptance for your life circumstances, and acceptance for what you are capable of is the psychological integration of the things that you have rejected. Parts about your own psychology that you think shouldn't be there, parts of your past you think shouldn't be there. Who you are becomes fuller and fuller of love the more you unconditionally accept yourself. And now suddenly this very like philosophical, abstract, kind of logical idea becomes very visceral and real. The more you know yourself, the more you love yourself. And the more you love yourself, the better life feels like. And loving yourself starts to become not just about who you are, but your relationship to all things in your own environment. Now, this is really the process of understanding your own ego architecture and merging your own consciousness with that architecture to eliminate all separation. The understanding of who you are is the acceptance of all reality. Because once you accept your own consciousness as inevitable, as by nature accepting everything unconditionally, then the ego starts to quiet down. Because, as a matter of fact, this unconditional acceptance would also be expressed through having to experience your life every little second. In fact, all experience, all consciousness must experience itself. There's no way around it. Like, whatever exists in its form wants to experience itself and kind of has to, right? Like, you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to go through your day and you're going to live your life. And the unconditional acceptance force is so strong that it doesn't matter if you are very tired and don't want to go to work, or if you're very frustrated about your life or frustrated with who you are. It is also included in that. And in a sense, all your resistance towards your own life is pretty much what makes it worse. It is the force of hatred that rejects what it already is. And if you can remove all of these layers and just look clearly about who you are, then it starts to look kind of delusional to reject anything. Like, at least in your own experience, whenever there's pain, there's discomfort, there's sadness, pushing it away cannot be the right answer. You must feel your feelings in order to accept who you are unconditionally. If you reject your feelings, then this causes a ton of negative consequences for your own psyche down the line. And you probably have noticed this yourself. Like, the more you actually allow yourself to be who you are authentically, the more you let yourself feel what you want to feel authentically, the better things become. Now, there's a lot about this that is easier said than done, right? Because the rawness of experience is pretty much in your face. And the more you dissolve into experience, the clearer it becomes how brutal it means to experience anything at all, how immediate experience is all the time. And usually we kind of get stuck in certain patterns and certain, like, you might almost say algorithms within their own mind, where it gets attached to its own narratives and attached to its own thinking. And the lack of acceptance is kind of part of the machinery of what the ego is. It is the force that resists its own nature. My ego architecture audits are there to facilitate where it is that we don't accept a part of ourselves, where there's something within us that we are still rejecting. And how my process works in its entirety, you can read in the PDF in the description below. The feeling that you finally found yourself is the sense that you finally unconditionally love your life. Because now it isn't a question anymore about who you should be, or who you kind of fail to be, or what you need to do to finally be whole and complete. But now it is about who you already are, and what parts of who you already are you not accepting yet. And this might go from the deeply psychological to the deeply emotional, to just what your dreams and aspirations are that you're not following, that you actually want to follow. Or in which way you kind of react negatively to your own pain. How you might just wake up in the morning and then just kind of have this feeling about not wanting to go through the day, right? Like, the dissatisfaction is a huge component about what points you to where the ego is not accepting something. And you kind of want to direct your consciousness and your awareness and your concentration to the parts that makes you feel unsatisfied. And it's very counterintuitive, because most people don't want to do this. They want to numb themselves out with entertainment. They want to drink alcohol to forget their worries. They want to pursue relationships in order to distract themselves from how much they dislike being alone. They want to play video games all day and smoke weed all day in order to not feel their own feelings. It's always the rejection of who you are with, some distraction that removes you from unconditional love and acceptance, which the difficult thing to do is to actually look at the parts you're not accepting, the parts that you're hating, and also accepting this hatred. To feel all the negative feelings of resentment, of guilt, of rejection, of frustration, and then accept it also unconditionally by experiencing it for how it is actually like. Not by telling yourself, wow, I'm very full of anger right now. This is unconditional love. That's very silly. No, the unconditional love component here would be to completely be mad and allow yourself to be angry and let this frustration be felt. This is what actual acceptance looks like. It is the visceral contact with how it is like to be a certain thing or to experience a certain state. And once you gain a very deep insight into how the mind functions, how your experience functions, then all of a sudden it becomes very natural. The idea that you could reject an emotion, like the mechanism that makes you reject an emotion, doesn't work anymore. The mechanism that makes you reject your life doesn't work anymore, because you notice how much of it was a delusion and how acceptance is the natural state of things. Now, if the natural state of things is also unconditional love, I guess it's for you to decide.